of King. It's time for the Wrestling Observer Extra. With Dave Meltzer, right here on The Law, live audio wrestling.
And let's go, man. Now smoking with the best.
Busy week for us covering this stuff. Even busier week
way
for
busier.
Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer newsletter. Dave, lots of time in Vegas. You're back home now, though?
Back home.
All right. Been a huge week, and of course tonight, just adding on to the three events you were just there for live, we're going to start with TLC and then work our way back, all right?
Sure.
We've run through the show and broke it down and you know, given a recap and stuff. So coming out of this, obviously the big angle at the end, when do you see Triple H and Reigns? Do you see it at the Royal Rumble or holding on to that till WrestleMania?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer. I'm actually trying to find that out right now. It looked like a WrestleMania angle, but I think that, you know, perhaps having him go with Triple H at the Rumble would then allow him to go for the championship at WrestleMania, because I think that's probably been the goal all along, is for him to win the title there. And this way it keeps him kind of away from it and having something big to do between now and Mania.
But wait a minute, Dave.
But then you got the Royal Rumble to think about.
Yeah.
And the Royal Rumble winner should be getting the shot at WrestleMania.
Yeah. So maybe, who knows? It's interesting.
Do you think Triple H is going to end up with the title somewhere in this?
That's a possibility too. But then he would have to win the Royal Rumble, and Triple H would have to win the championship from Sheamus. Right. Which doesn't, unless you put a guy in between, and I don't know who that guy would be, and he'd have to be in and out really quick. I guess I could always do that with John Cena because since he's coming back, I suppose.
But Roman Reigns winning the Royal Rumble is an extremely risky scenario that we've already gone down that road a couple times.
Absolutely. Yep. Especially in Orlando, because it's going to be, I think, with NXT and everything, I think it's going to be a heavily traveling crowd, and that heavily traveling crowd is going to be very anti-Roman Reigns.
Dave, were you surprised by the kind of blatant copy of Stone Cold and McMahon at the end of the pay-per-view tonight? Because it's obvious that that's the direction they're going to go now and book him like Stone Cold.
I tell you what, I thought that the post-match on the pay-per-view was brilliant, because when that thing ended with the finish it was, I thought that it was just like, what a bad finish. But when you did it's like he snapped, and that's the first time in a long time that they've booked a babyface like Dusty Rhodes or someone like that where he snaps. I mean, he gets screwed, he snaps,
right.
He gets revenge on everyone that screwed him. And, you know, usually the babyfaces in WWE are like, they back down to the authority, and that's why they don't get over. So I thought that, it's the proof was in the pudding, in the sense that they didn't want. If you remember the first time he climbed that ladder, people were booing like crazy.
That's right.
They really didn't want him to win. By the end of the match, when Sheamus was about to win, they really didn't want Sheamus to win anymore, which is what the outside interference did. But when it was over, you know, it was like they were way behind him as he was beating up Triple H. So he completely turned a crowd that didn't want to be behind him into being behind him by the way they used Triple H. Used Triple H and used Del Rio and Rusev.
Yeah, it was surprising. They were actually chanting "Thank you, Roman" at the end of that segment.
That's right. So I thought it worked great. Because I was thinking, it's like, I don't think he's going to win the championship on this, kind of B show thing.
Right.
Because this is not really a show to, you want to do a coronation in. But it was like, what, he fails again? You know what I mean? It was like we already saw that last month. I thought, how are they going to get out of it? And I mean, they got out of it as good as you're going to get out of it. Plus, they got people behind them, which has been a struggle.
Yeah.
Tonight, we did not see Wade Barrett we saw him in a vignette, but then didn't see him out there. Is there something wrong with Wade Barrett, or why?
I don't know. That's a good question.
It was really weird because he was in that vignette, which could have been pre-taped at the beginning of the night, but then for the run-in, he wasn't there.
And I don't know any reason why, because, quite frankly, he could take all those spears just as well as anyone. So they're probably, and again, they just put the group together, so I would think that there's something behind that, but I don't know what the story is yet.
Interesting.
Let's continue with WWE here and talk about one of the biggest news notes of tonight is the fact that Mauro Ranallo, our friend up here from the Fight Network and has moved on to do great things with Showtime and such, has signed on to be the lead announcer for SmackDown when it moves over to USA Network. Dave, how long did you know about this deal?
Well, Frank Shamrock negotiated it, so I guess that means I knew, but I didn't know. I mean, I knew, but it was like one of those things where WWE had to, you know what I mean? It was like I was told, like, you got to let WWE break this one.
Right. So Frank Shamrock was the in-between?
What did Frank Shamrock have to do with this?
Frank manages
Frank Shamrock is Mauro's agent.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he did this deal, and this is a very interesting deal, especially for WWE. You're bringing an announcer in. I'm guessing not going to change his name simply because he's still going to be allowed to do outside properties.
As long as it's not wrestling, he can do outside stuff, yeah.
So they're not going to change his name. They're not going to call him, Kyle Edwards.
They're not going to change his name, as best I can tell. And they're, the impression I have is I don't think they're going to greatly change his style because he's got a style already, which is really interesting because, he's my favorite announcer of pro wrestling by far this year. But his style is so different from what they do. I mean, obviously he's not going to be announcing like he announces New Japan. I don't think it's possible to do that because you've got to mix in a lot of stuff and you'd probably be funnier. He's funny there too, but you got to do a lot of plugs and it's just a different thing. However, I don't, if they wanted a copy, or a robot, or like the announcers they usually have.
Nope.
They've got them in developmental already, and they don't need to bring him in for that. So it's to me, it's a sign. They wanted a facelift, and I guess they wanted somebody who was recognizable as this facelift, for the move to Showtime. I mean
to USA.
Back down to USA. Yeah.
So who do you think they put with them, Dave? Like, do Lawler, Booker?
Well, no. More important, does this spell the end for Jerry Lawler with the WWE?
It remains to be seen. Nobody seems to know right now who he's going to work with. Or, that was definitely something that I had thought of. Is could this be that? Especially if he's going to work pay-per-views as the third guy, because I know they're not going to take Cole off because he's the voice of Raw, and I think that Layfield is pretty much he's the voice of Vince. So
yeah.
So if Mauro is doing pay-per-views, that would take Lawler off pay-per-views. I don't know. I mean, they may want to keep Lawler anyway. It all remains to be seen.
It'll be interesting to see Mauro working with somebody in his ear.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when he's doing other stuff, there's guys in his ear.
But it's not the same thing, really.
No. No one, every announcer that I've talked to. Well, yeah, but here's the thing. Vince is not at a lot of the SmackDowns. And so a lot of times it's Triple H. And sometimes it's Michael Cole. So it's not the same thing as on Raw.
Right.
But sometimes Vince is there. And when he is, then it is that. So, we've had, Taz who left, because, there's a lot of reasons he left. But as far as, the thing in the ear wasn't that good. Foley outright quit over the thing in the ear. And everyone who's been there and left, will tell you how much it drove him crazy. So, yeah, it's a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
Let's flip over to Lucha Underground. I got a press release from Lucha Underground talking about Rey Mysterio. So he is now attached. He's made his debut at the tapings. And along with that, Matanza, the Monsters, debuted. Well,
Monster,
at the tapings.
Monster debuted last night.
So,
Jeff Cobb.
Sorry, what was that?
Jeff Cobb.
Jeff Cobb is the Monster. Not a very tall monster, though.
No, I think Jeff's probably about 5'9". So, yeah, he's not a tall monster. He worked with Pentagon last night, and they were about the same size, although Jeff is a lot heavier because he's pretty thick. But he's wearing, like, a overall costume, so you don't really see his physique or anything like that.
Like the prison-style costume, right?
Yeah, prison cell, yeah. Prison cell costume with a mask and everything. So I haven't seen pictures of it yet, but that's what it was kind of described to me as. But here's another one, and this actually just happened today, and I don't know if you had heard it, but he may have injured his ankle today.
Oh no!
Yeah, so I'm still awaiting word on what happened. All I know is that he landed badly in a match with Mil Muertes, and they did the X sign, and it looked like it was a legitimate injury. And that would be, incredible if I mean, could you imagine the luck of that? Especially if you're the guy in that gimmick. Well, let's wait and see what happens. But I mean, does that mean that they'll put someone else under the gimmick? Or I'm sure that knowing him, he'll probably work through it. But if it's a break, you may not be able to, right?
Oh,
especially
man,
when they're filming, all the filmings in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, that is rough for sure.
Rey Mysterio being involved with this property is huge, though, just due to the marketability of Rey. Do you see this knocking down or opening any doors to networks because of Rey's involvement?
No, I don't think that in the United States that's going to make a big difference. But it could in Mexico. They were they were so close to the deal with Televisa in Mexico that I was all but told it was a done deal and it was going to save the company, and then it didn't. As you guys we all know, when it comes to television deals, they all come. So many of them come close and don't happen. But Rey is a big deal there, so it could help there. Remains to be seen, but I don't see. I don't see. Again, for a paying property and everything, it's a tough business right now. Trying to make it as a wrestling television show, especially with the kind of budget that they go through. I know that they cut their budget back to a degree, but not that much. I mean, it's still, and it has to be, based on what they're doing and everything. I mean, their whole thing was that real high, gritty, look. I mean, that's their whole MO.
Wow, very interesting. One other thing we've discussed UFC 194 and ran through it all and how amazing it was. But there's one particular note that we heard this week that I'm kind of curious about, and that's the state of Joe Rogan with UFC, because it sounds like his contract's coming up and that maybe he's thinking about stepping away.
He's talked about it. The feeling that I get is that maybe he'll work a lesser schedule. But he's doing. I think they've got him down to about 16 dates a year, which is still a lot. With the travel and everything like that. Yeah, I mean, I think his contract's up in August, so it's a long ways off still, and there's a lot that can happen between now and then. So, yeah. But he talked about it openly on his podcast that he doesn't know what he's going to do when his contract is up, and he's not sure.
Maybe he'll replace Lawler.
He'll be on SmackDown too, yeah.
That one I don't expect.
Dave, before we go, we've dug into UFC 194, as Mouth said, but who do you see Conor McGregor fighting next?
I think that we should talk about that on Sunday, because what I see is that if Dos Anjos wins, I think that he stays at featherweight and fights Frankie Edgar. If Cerrone wins, I see him moving up and fighting Cerrone.
Right.
The question of, he wants to keep both belts. He wants to win one belt, keep both belts, defend both belts, which would be, it would be quite the story. Dana White was pretty negative on that. There's a lot going on there right now.
And do you see Ireland happening, or will we see this in Las Vegas?
They did so much money in Las Vegas. But yeah, I mean, remember he promised Conor Croke Park, and Dana wasn't there last night, so we don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And Conor McGregor afterwards, when it was kind of brought up, I mean, he wasn't so definite about it. Nobody was definite about it. So, maybe they want UFC 200 or something. Who knows? But I mean, keeping him away till July, that seems a little long.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe you'd want him in May. But originally the idea was if he won, he would go to Croke Park, and I think that we got to hear from Dana as what's happening next. But I don't think anything's going to be for sure until the Dos Anjos Cerrone fight's over, and then we can kind of digest. The year will be over for UFC, and then we can kind of look at, okay, where does everything go for early next year? But Conor winning was, it's phenomenal for them, because it guarantees. It pretty much guarantees that they're going to have a great year, because once Conor won the championship, you guys know this, like once he won the championship, now he can, if he loses the title, he'll get a return. I mean, It's like you've got a lot of fights that are going to be with him that are going to be big main events that are going to draw big numbers. So
and he likes to fight too. Like, he wants to fight a fair bit during the year, it sounds like.
Yeah. So that's interesting. But a lot of these guys want to fight a lot more, and I think that UFC feels, and again, there's the thing of the marketability aspect. If one of the reasons why I think that a lot of these guys draw very well is because they only fight 3 times a year.
Yeah.
And maybe if they fight 6 times a year, it's too much, and then it can't draw as big because it's too, almost like the idea of like why Brock Lesnar is going to, that's a bad example, but because they didn't do it right. But you know what I mean? It's like, what is the right number? Now, I mean, like some of these guys can do, like Neil Magny, and we've seen guys do 5 or 6 fights, but these are guys that are not the big time draws. And how many times a year are people from Ireland going to come to Las Vegas? Will they come twice a year? Yes, I believe they will. 3, maybe.
Right.
6, no.
No, yeah.
So you got to figure out what's the right number.
Right.
All right, Dave, we got a wrap for this week. I just assume the Observer is all of your adventures over the past 4 days with your travel, seeing the live shows, plus TLC and what happens tomorrow, correct?
Correct.
Lots.
There's going to be a ton of stuff. More private stuff on Mauro Ranallo.
Yes.
Just preparing for the New Japan big show January 4th. So, yeah, a big week.
Awesome. We'll look forward to that, and we'll chat with you next week after that Cerrone fight.
Okay, awesome. Have a great week.
Great. Dave Meltzer, WrestlingObserver.com is where you can find his fine work.